Assalamu alaikum, ya ahlul internet. So, October is Dysautonomia Awareness Month, and one of the things that it causes, among others, is difficulty in word finding. So, if there are unnaturally long pauses in my sentences, please just assume that I'm thinking of something wise and deep and very meaningful. I thought that what I would do was to provide a rundown of what dysautonomia is and the effect that it has on people. And then I realized that that's what Google is for. And that perhaps it might be more useful if I could talk about how dysautonomia affects me and how I got diagnosed. Now, once upon a time, a long time ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, if I stood up too fast, I might get dizzy or pass out. It was lots of fun. Great party trick. Yeah. I was told that it may be because I had anemia, but even when the anemia was corrected, it didn't go away. I just kind of learned to live with it and it's like, yeah, okay, fine. So I pass out sometimes. Life goes on. I'm half Pakistani. It could be like the Bollywood Lollywood gene coming out where I choose to faint at dramatic moments. It's okay. Then after I had my first son, Khalid, my arms felt really heavy. Like I'd be hanging up these teeny tiny little baby onesies and I'd be like, oh my God, oh, I'm exhausted. But it was okay if I held them like down, but as soon as I raised my arms above my shoulders, it was like, oh, I'm out of breath. I'm dying. Turns out that the blood isn't reaching my arms. That's a different story, but that's also autonomic dysfunction. So then I had a second kid and, was doing okay, but got weaker and tireder and started to have pain in one side of my body and not in another. By the time I had my third child, Musfida, aka Cupcake, really odd things were going on. Body pain, cold intolerance, really severe anxiety and panic attacks over nothing. Like, I'm not even stressed out. And I remember one day I saw a Band-Aid and my brain went down the darkest road possible of injuries to my children in a situation where no medical care was available and the incurable suffering of the human condition and anxiety and stress to the point where I would get my stomach in these dark cold knots and I'd start having chest pain. And I remember I actually took myself to the emergency room once and said, I don't even know what's happening to me, but I don't feel right and I need help. And the doctor said, have you thought about antidepressants? And I said, but I'm not depressed. I'm not even unhappy. I have nothing to be upset about. There's nothing wrong in my life. Yes, I have a son with autism, but, if you had asked me if I was depressed a few years ago, I would have said yes, and I'm working on it. But I was at a time after, my third kid was born, I was okay. I was happy. But I was still having such severe anxiety that I just didn't know what to do with myself. I also started to have a lot of muscular weakness. Another one of my parlor tricks is this weird thing that my left hand does, and I wouldn't have noticed it unless I had to pat a lot of little people to sleep. You put one up here on the shoulder, and then you go pat, 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 pat. Oh, there it goes. And apparently, I don't know what this is, but the theory from my assortment of specialists is that the signal from my brain to my hand is getting garbled. And it only does this on my left hand. And it only does this for this very specific movement of raising and lowering my left hand. So that's where the difficulty in typing comes in. Because you can see how when you're typing, and you've got your hand on the keyboard and you start doing this and your hand's like, hey, are we patting a baby? I'm like, no, we're not patting a baby. We're just trying to type. And my hand's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, we're sure. So we're just going to type. And we're like, maybe we won't type today. And then my right hand is like, tick, So typing is not awesome. Um, so weird things started happening. Started getting fibromyalgia where I remember my left leg burned for no apparent reason. And I went to a neurologist who stuck me with needles and shocked me with tasers and stuck electrodes all over my head. And he's like, well, there's nothing wrong with you. I'm like, thanks. That doesn't necessarily answer the questions that I have about all these weird things that seem to come and go when I'm not expecting them, and go away at their own volition and then come back when I'm not expecting them. Um, and then he's like, well, maybe you have a wasting muscle disorder because of the muscular weakness. And I thought, oh my god, am I dying? Do I have some sort of myopathy? And so I had a muscle biopsy done, and they don't give you a general anesthetic because they don't want to mess up their sample. So you get a little bit of like magic spray on the arm, like pss, pss, and then they cut a hole in your arm and they cut out a piece of muscle about the size of a really big salad crouton without painkillers. And that was one of the most interesting experiences of my life because not only can you not scream, you can't move because you're going to mess up the surgeon. And she's like, hello, I'm trying to work here. And I'm like, hello, you're cutting a hole in my arm. But it doesn't matter whether you can see it or not. Your body still knows what's going on. That was shocking. So they sent off a cube of my arm to a laboratory somewhere, and it came back as having atrophy. And so my neurologist said, yep, you have a random muscle wasting disorder. Go somewhere and like waste away and die now. I'm like, okay, bye. That was a bit shocking to be told because it's not nice being told that you have a uncurable muscle wasting disease when you have 3 kids and okay, bye. And I spent, I think, a few weeks or months doing research on the computer. And I went back again to my neurologist and he said, what are you here for? I was like, oh, gee, I guess I don't know since you have nothing to offer me. But my sister, the Auli Pai, who also has Ehlers-Danlos and autonomic dysfunction, God bless her, a bazillion ways, she Googled myopathy experts and found me a myopathy expert in Chicago at Rush University Hospital. And I went to the U.S. to go and see him, and he went through a really long list of questions and told me, he's like, okay, so what's your medical history? And I'm like going back 4 and 5 years. And he's like, no. When you were born, start from there. And the things that he managed to piece together that I hadn't even noticed were, neuropathy. When I was 14, I went to a doctor because my left arm hurt like nobody's business. And the doctor did the dumbest thing. He was a GP. He said, oh, well, if your left arm really is hurting, we're going to have to put lots of needles into it. And then I want to zap electricity through them. And I was like, oh, hey, oh, that's great. No, I've decided my arm isn't hurting anymore. And I left. But it was. And what he was saying was, we'll need to do an EMG. But I suppose what he was trying to do was scare me off because I was an attention-seeking fake. I don't know. I could have had an EMG then. But instead, I had my next EMG 20 years later. So I started having neuropathy as a teenager and passing out. And when I'm cold, my fingers turn blue because I'm not very good at regulating my body temperature. When I'm hot, I get something that's very similar to heat stroke, and it's not even that hot outside. There's a lot of really weird stuff that's been going on with me for years and years. Transient food allergies. I will be violently allergic to lettuce for like weeks and then scared of eating it because it feels like death is passing through your system on its way out. And then I'll have some later, it'll be fine until my body changes its mind again. And milk. I have transient allergies to milk, and this all depends on how well my stomach is functioning at the time, based on my brain's garbled and incorrect instructions. Salt cravings. I eat tons of salt, like metric tons of salt. I will salt my food before I've eaten it. because the level of salt that I need to keep my blood pressure high enough to get blood up to my brain is a lot saltier than people voluntarily cook with, unless they've made a massive mistake. So if you ever oversalt your food, just send it to me. I'll be like, yeah, someone finally got it right. So salt cravings, cold intolerance, passing out, neuropathy, migraine, transient food allergies, asthma-like symptoms. But I don't have asthma. And it's taken years to figure out that when I exercise too hard, not only am I getting tachycardia, so I'm getting like a heart rate of 150 beats per minute just from climbing a stairs, which is like someone running a marathon from a bear for their life. I'm also getting my body clamping down on my lungs in an attempt to control the panic. So when one of my nerve systems goes all crazy, the other one says, hey, we're not having any more of this crazy, and so they put it on lockdown. So my body's trying to tell my lungs to stop. Which, isn't really a good thing. So all of these things that don't seem to be connected end up, alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, being connected to autonomic dysfunction, because, the systems that control all of these things only need to malfunction in one place for them all to be totally messed up. And it turns out I don't have myopathy. And I wouldn't have known this if, subhanAllah, the myopathy expert wasn't also an expert in autonomic dysfunction. So he said to me, hey, guess what? You don't have myopathy. I was like, what? What do you mean? My fatal diagnosis? At least I had a diagnosis. He's like, no, you have autonomic dysfunction. And I went back again a few months later and did all the tests, and I had the tilt table test, where what they do is they strap you to a table and check your body temperature and your heart rate and your blood pressure and a few other things. And then they basically, you're laying down, and then they slowly stand the table up. And for a person who doesn't have orthostatic intolerance, when you stand up, the blood that would normally go downwards because gravity would get pushed back up to your brain where it needs to be because brain. When you have orthostatic intolerance, the blood stays down there in your feet while your toes think very philosophical thoughts. And your brain is like, red alert, red alert, red alert. And you can lose consciousness or, put your autonomic system into red alert again. It takes so little to set it off sometimes. A different medication. Very intolerant to medications because they really confuse my brain all over again. Jet lag. Stress. The autonomic system is like a top, and you spin it, and it's all level, and like, yay, we're just spinning along, doing our thing, we're okay. And then any brief gust of wind, or like a little person's finger or a paper clip, you hit it or touch it, and then the top goes, and it wobbles around for a while before it's able to stabilize itself. So I've forgotten how to go home. I've been on the road and be like, uh-oh. Where am I going? And where do I live? Which exit do I take? Because just then, the information retrieving parts of my brain are shut down because the autonomic system is confused again, and so lights are flashing and, alarms are going off, and all the employees are running around inside of the building going, I have terrible short-term memory. Like, I meet people and I have a lovely time, and I meet them again, and it's like meeting them for the first time again, and it's might be funny the first time, but it's not funny the fifth or sixth time when people just assume that you're blowing them off. Like, really? I've met you twice. And you're like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. I've never met you before. And you're like, yes, you did. I just get really embarrassed. For a year and a half, my staff used to call me every Thursday and remind me to pick the kids up from school because they had a half day on Thursday, and I would forget that. You'd think a mom would forget her kids at school maybe once. Not every week. So yeah, it's not all like Dory and Finding Nemo. It's not glamorous. It's not cool. It gives me what I feel is like chronic jerk syndrome. Where I make appointments to meet people and go out and do things, and I either am so tired that I cannot make it because my brain has decided to shut down, or I forget that I've made it. I was actually scheduled to speak at a conference once, and I was a no-show. And I didn't even realize that I blew off a conference where I was scheduled to speak until the organizers called me 2 hours after I was speaking. They said, "So, were you planning on coming in today?" I said, no. Why would I come in? Like, because you were speaking? I was mortified, utterly mortified. And it sounds like an excuse, when you tell people beforehand, okay, I suppose, oh, okay, yeah, sure, you've got short-term memory problem. Okay. It sounds worse when you say it afterwards, like you're just, oh, I didn't show up because I have memory problems. Yeah, science. And people are like, right, science. Sure. Not easy. A little weird, a little strange. I meet people, I can't remember their names. I make appointments, I fail to show up. I fall asleep in other people's houses on their sofas, or in my car at the side of the road. Little weird. So yeah, taking a few steps back, the autonomic dysfunction, again, is caused by the Ehlers-Danlos, which is the collagen dysfunction, which means my veins don't return blood to my head properly, and then my head malfunctions. And an additional side effect of that is that I also have an autoimmune condition, which is probably also caused by my brain not getting enough blood, and then my body gets confused and it starts attacking itself. So if somebody sneezes on me, oh my god, I will take those germs and I will lovingly handcraft them into something amazing. They will incubate and flourish and blossom inside of me, and I can take a cold and turn into bronchitis. And I usually do on an annual basis. So I've now started taking steroids preventatively based on my doctor's recommendation so that I don't get pneumonia. People say that POTS, autonomic dysfunction, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, these things aren't fatal. Well, yeah, car crashes aren't fatal either because, a lot of people live through them, but the complications can kill you. You know, people die of pneumonia and bronchitis, and some of them even starve to death because their stomach decides to stop being a stomach, and then they have what's called gastroparesis, where their stomach is paralyzed and their intestines are turned off. So it doesn't matter whether you put food in them anyways, their body wouldn't know what to do with it, and they starve to death. Kind of crazy. Other people, like my sister, have vascular fragility. I have vascular fragility too, but it's not as bad as hers by a long shot. She had an aneurysm in her brain. Her brain tried to explode. Like her veins, which are supposed to be like neat little garden hoses, are more like those balloons that you make snakes and giraffes out of at a party. And so the vein had a bubble. And by the time that she went in for surgery, her bubble had a bubble, and that one had a bubble too. So everything was about to be like inside of her brain. And alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alhamdulillah, it didn't. And they ended up shooting a little bit of liquid cement inside of her brain to seal off the bubble so it wouldn't blow up. So her husband says that she has rocks for brains, and she does. It shows up in an x-ray. It's really funny. I like to say she has a pet rock. But more importantly, she's alive. And that's awesome. Other interesting stuff about autonomic dysfunction. It's an invisible illness. And people with chronic and invisible illnesses usually work very hard to not look or sound or seem sick because it's such a downer. You know, yes, you feel terrible. The best thing that you can do is get dressed, smile, and get yourself out of the house because that's the only way of surviving. So, a lot of times, you know, if I do tell someone that I am chronically ill, the first thing I hear is, "But you don't look sick." It's so amazing. It's like people have been programmed to all say the same thing. Very weird. Um, no, I do look sick because I am sick. So therefore, any way that I look must be sick. Do I look miserable? No, I don't look miserable because I work very hard at being not miserable. I believe that happiness is a choice. You know, gratefulness and patience and sabr and shukr, these are choices. Health is not a choice, it's not even an option. You know, the human condition is one of inevitable deterioration and viral and bacterial assault throughout your lifetime, along the way to death and decay. Health is an illusion. If you have something like it, alhamdulillah, be grateful. But know that it's not permanent and it's not, you know, a normal state for people. Gratitude and happiness, though, you can create this. You can find them if you look hard enough. And you get better at finding it because the alternative is not acceptable. It's not okay to just, you know, roll around and woe is me, why did God do this to me, misery. Some people do that even when they're perfectly healthy and they have all the money in the world, and then they end up killing themselves. So I don't think happiness is a product of your living conditions. I think happiness is a choice, and I choose to be happy, even though, you know, it's weird being sick all the time because, you know, okay, you have the flu for a few days and you're like, yeah, even this too will pass, inshallah. Or, you know, you break your leg and you're like, yeah, in a few weeks this will come off. You know? And you know that there's a happy ending to it. I don't want to say that there isn't a happy ending to chronic illness because you're not going to get better, but it's a wonderful reminder of how hard and how important it is to work for Jannah. Because if you don't have that, there is no happy ending. Some people are looking forward to, like, you know, castles in heaven made out of Godiva chocolates. I wouldn't mind that. But I'm really excited about not ever being tired, about having knees that don't click and ache and grind against each other. I'm really excited about being able to run. Not up a mountain, just run. Or take the stairs without having chest pain. You know, just little things like this. So yeah, you can Google the symptoms for autonomic dysfunction. I might even put a link in the description of this video. I'll pick one out. But yeah, that's in a nutshell how autonomic dysfunction affects me. Also, I can take this opportunity to make the excuse for why I only talk with one side of my mouth, which is a little weird watching yourself on video because you realize that, you know, despite being a non-makeup wearing, I don't give a flying fish about my clothes person, it's still weird seeing myself have a lopsided smile and talking style. It's because of nerve damage. It's because my nerves aren't doing what they're supposed to do. I don't like. But yeah, that's it. That's autonomic dysfunction and me. Yay! That was really long. Sorry, but I hope you learned something. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.